Hi folks, this is Donald. In this video you join me in New Orleans and I'm going to be trying to sketch the entirety of this scene of this purple house and all the surrounding objects, the wires, the trees, everything I can see as I try to evolve my sketching style into the next phase of what I want to be achieving. And this is the sort of scene that I've been wanting to be able to draw but didn't feel like I was quite at the level where I could. And now I just go for it. I'm just not overthinking it. I'm just going to draw a scene no matter how complicated it is and I'll just figure it out. That's the way that I'm thinking about things these days, and so far it seems to be working out without any major disasters. And I do feel like trying to draw much more complicated scenes is making me better at drawing, so that's why I think it's good to share these, and hopefully others will take some inspiration and ideas from seeing me putting these together, because as I say, up until recently I would never have attempted a complete scene like this. In fact, I know I wouldn't have, because this very scene was one that I saw a long time ago and I saved the photograph thinking, oh, it'd be great if I could one day be good enough to be able to draw that scene. And it was all the wires that were going everywhere and the trees and the plants. I didn't know how to draw stuff like that and I thought I'm bound to make a mess of it, so I just talked myself out of even trying, whereas now I'm just drawing stuff and finding that I can do it much better than I thought I could. Not to say that this drawing is perfect by any means, there are some big mistakes, but overall I can see real progress being made. The big changes that I've made in recent weeks that have led to where I'm at now with my sketching style are that, for one thing, I'm drawing much bigger. I'm now on to drawing on A3 size pads, so it gives you much more room to draw a bigger scene and pack more in, but also leave more white space, which I quite like. And I'm enjoying the difference of how it feels to draw larger. It does take a bit of getting used to drawing things on a larger scale, and I find that I'm not always getting the proportions right, but that's something that will come with practice. As you can see, I'm also spending a lot more time to draw things in much more detail than I used to. For example, trees and plants, bushes, all that kind of stuff. In the past, I would have just done a curly line like a child would draw a cloud, but now I've decided I'm going to spend a bit more time on drawing things like bushes and trees and go for more texture, more detail. And so you can see with the tree, I drew all the thousands and thousands of little leaves, and they were just little circles, but it did take a long time to do that. But the result is that you get a much more textured finish. And overall, doing all of this has led to me taking significantly longer in my sketches than I ever have in the past. This one took just short of 6 hours in total, and I had to split it over 2 sessions because it was just taking too long and there was no way I was going to get it finished all in one sitting. And when I started to make mistakes, when I was getting tired, I knew that that was when I should stop, and then I would come back to it fresh. And I think that's something that I did benefit from doing. So if I'm going to be doing bigger sketches with lots and lots of detail like this, then I'm probably going to see if I can split them into different sessions rather than trying to do it all at once from now on when time allows. It does make it quite difficult for YouTube though, because if I'm going to try and film a 6-hour drawing and then it has to be hyper speeded up so much that it becomes almost unwatchable. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get the balance between making videos that are watchable and still trying to improve my own drawing and putting that level of detail that I would have avoided in the past. The one other thing that I've done that has significantly improved my drawing is that I have evolved from an ultra wobbly, wonky sketching style into something that is more naturally wobbly and wonky. So if I make a wobbly line, it just comes out naturally wobbly rather than me artificially shaping the windows into an odd shape. I'm just trying to draw what I can see in front of me. And if it comes out wonky and wobbly, that's great. That adds to the character of the scene, but not nearly as deliberately wonky as it used to be. I just want it to feel more naturally that way. And when you add that to the extra time that I'm spending on sketches, I mean, it's unthinkable that I would be spending 6 hours doing a drawing when the sketches that I used to do that I was filming for YouTube were probably an hour to an hour and a half tops. And now to spend 4, 5, 6 hours on a drawing, that's why I'm seeing the big improvement in my ability to draw scenes that I otherwise would have thought too frightening, too scary to draw. There's no way I could have pulled this off. And all the stuff in the scene, like the wires, all that jumble of wires on the right hand side, that's the very thing that made me want to sketch it, but also want to not sketch it, because it just looked too complicated, too difficult, trying to work out where all these wires go, and they're crisscrossing each other, and it's all a big jumble. I mean, what a nightmare to draw, but I love the way it looks because of that, and I had so much fun figuring it all out. I think in the past, if I had tried to draw the scene, I probably would have edited out all the wires and maybe even the trees and just done the house front on and left it at that. Because I think when you're a relative beginner, there's just too much to process when you're drawing an entire scene like this. It just feels overwhelming. But I'm finding with a lot of practice that I have learnt how to construct scenes and how it all works. And still with a long way to go, but it is incredibly satisfying to know that all the hours you spend practicing your drawing does pay off. I can see it in the way I'm drawing now compared to where I was when I started. It's night and day, and there's still a long way to go. But I know now, I have the evidence that practice does pay off, like the improvement is there, and it's something you have to kind of go through yourself, because it's one thing for someone to say you just need to practice, you just need to put in the hours, but until you see it in your own work, I think it's difficult to be convinced that that's true. So if you are fairly early on in your development as a sketcher, then all I can say is do persist. You will see the improvement over time, and sometimes it can happen really quickly. I mean, even a few weeks ago, I wouldn't have thought that I would be drawing a scene like this. And by the way, that's not to say that it's perfect. There are lots of mistakes in here. For example, the underside of the roof, I drew that completely wrong. You'll see that the 4 jutty out bits that are holding the roof up, or appearing to hold the roof up, I drew them far too short. They should go right to the edge of the roof, and I drew them short and then had to draw the circles at the top. That's not how it is in real life, but it still looked okay. It's just slightly different how it is in reality, but it doesn't worry me too much if I make a mistake like that. I can just accept that my drawing is slightly different to the real world scene and move on. But things like that happen when you stop paying attention to exactly what's in front of you. So I am trying very hard to teach myself to focus on the scene more than the page. If I make a mistake, it's almost always because I wasn't paying attention to the scene and was just concentrating on the drawing, or either that or my mind had drifted to something else and I was not paying attention. Another example of that was the railings beside the steps in front of each door at the front of the house. I missed 2 of the railings. There's supposed to be one on either side of the steps, and not that it really matters, but again, that was just because I wasn't paying attention. I thought the palm tree in the middle and the big bushy plant type thing on the left hand side turned out really well. Especially the bush on the left hand side, I thought that looks almost photorealistic. I mean, it's just lots and lots of little dashes on the leaves, and it's another good example of what happens when you spend a bit more time on something and pay a bit more attention to trying to get the details right. I also quite like when you just surprise yourself and you go, oh, I didn't know I could draw that. It's a happy accident. I do wish though that I hadn't drawn the leaves that you can see in the foreground. In the end, I just thought it was a bit distracting, and I would have preferred to just have a nice white smooth road in front of the house and focus all your attention on the house and the objects around it. I know there is the theory about having something near you for depth perception, but I just felt it was clashing a little bit with the background. And maybe if I was going to colour this in full colour, then you would be able to distinguish it easier. But as you will see, I am going to be using a full range of greys, and then it becomes harder to distinguish foreground from background unless you really ramp up the contrast. I also wanted to mention a little exciting thing that's going on in my life right now outside of sketching. Even if you've been following this channel right from the very beginning, one thing you won't know because I've never mentioned it is that I am also a writer. And my debut novel, which is a children's book, has just been published and is now available to buy. It is a Christmas story. It's called Mother Christmas. It's a book that I'm very proud of. And so if you have any children or grandchildren and you think they would be interested in an original, funny, heartwarming Christmas story, then do check it out. I'll put a link in the description to where you can buy it wherever you are in your part of the world. So you've seen in my last few videos that I've been experimenting with different amounts of contrast, and I did a couple of sketches that use a pure black approach to colouring in. So there was the coffee shop and then the bridge scene in Venice. My conclusion from doing that was that the black was just a bit too much on its own, so I've reined it back in and I've returned to using the different shades of grey, building that back into the type of drawing that I'm doing now and using the black for things like the windows, turning the lights off, and then using lots of shades of grey for the rest. So as you can see, I am going around turning off all the lights apart from one window, which I have turned on using the yellow. And for all of this colouring in, I am using the Faber-Castell Pit Artist brush pen range. All of the greys are soft brush greys. There are 4 of them. And then the yellow that I used and the black, they're both firmer tipped. So I've gone back to the technique that I used to employ for most of my drawings, which is to build up the different layers, starting with the lightest and then working my way up to the darkest. So I went around all of the scene that I thought needed a bit of grey on it in the cold grey one, the lightest grey. So that was all the physical objects and anywhere where I thought it needed a bit of shadow. Now these pit pens are filled with India ink, so unlike other types of markers, these are permanent, waterproof, light fast, so you can hang your picture on the wall if you want to, it's not going to fade away. The downside of them being filled with India ink is that it does dry incredibly quickly, so you have to keep the ink moving and it does take a lot of practice. It can sometimes be a little bit blotchy and streaky if you don't move fast enough because it dries too quickly, and then you're covering lines that are already dry with wet ink and it's like it's building up another layer. So it takes a lot of practice to get good at being precise with colouring in with this type of marker pen, but the upside is that, as I say, it is a permanent ink. It is also a vegan product. Someone was asking in one of my videos which pens I would recommend for vegans, and so these Faber-Castell pens are vegan friendly, and in fact what I like about Faber-Castell in general is that the entirety of their product range, every single product that they manufacture is vegan friendly and animal cruelty free, which is something that not all companies guarantee, so I don't think that's something that anyone would object to. As you know, if you saw last week's video, I have now been on YouTube making these videos for a year, and this feels like a good point to reflect and see where I want to take my videos and this channel in future. So this feels like a good point to ask for your feedback. I would love to know what you think could be improved on this channel, or if you have any ideas. Do you like this format of the way I'm working in terms of time-lapse videos of really long detailed sketches, or do you think I should do shorter, simpler sketches again like it was before that take up less time and don't need to be hyper time-lapsed quite as much? Do you prefer to watch real-time videos? It's difficult to cater to everyone's tastes, but if you're here watching this, whether you're a newcomer to the channel or whether you've been watching for a while, if you have any ideas for scenes that I could draw or ideas for videos that you'd like to see, I do want to make videos that people want to watch, so do let me know what you think and you can pop your thoughts in the comments. So once I'd done 2 layers, there was the cold grey 1 and then the cold grey 3, which is the next one up. I went to the 3rd grey, the cold grey 4, added in another layer to selected bits like the trees, just to try and separate them from the house behind it. And overall I was getting to a point where I was quite happy with the way this was looking. But don't head off yet because there is one more thing to see. After I finished filming, and a few hours later I was looking at it and I just felt that the wires needed to be separated from the building a bit more. I just felt they were the same colour tone as the building and I wanted them to come forward for a bit more perception of depth. So I went back in with another layer and I went with the darkest of the 4 greys, the cold grey 6, coloured in the wires, and also added a bit more to the big leaves in the foreground to try and bring them forward as well and separate it from the background. The foreground leaves I don't think it worked quite as well, but the wires I felt it did make them jump out more. It separated them from the rest of the scene and enhanced that mad jumble that you see on the right hand side. So I was quite pleased with that, and I'm glad I went back and took that extra bit of time as if I needed to be spending any longer on this sketch. I mean, I even feel older than when I started this drawing. It was so long ago, but thanks so much for watching, and for more sketching inspiration like this, you can click on this video right here, and I will see you in the next one.